Hey everyone, it's Ellis, and this is going to be the patch 10.9 notes rundown. Unfortunately, there's no MSI happening in the month of May, and I'm not sure if actually 10.9 would have been the MSI patch. I think that it is the MSI patch, but fortunately it's not here. I don't know what to expect in 10.9 because competitive is obviously going to be stopped for a little while now, and I don't even know what sort of approach Riot's going to take, so let's just jump into it. So, first impressions on buffed and nerfed champions. Cho'Gath, Fiddlesticks, Naraku, Kane, Lissandra, and Quinn is really scary, because I think that 3 of these champions really have the potential to shake up the meta, and what I'm referring to there is Quinn, Lissandra, and then depending on actually how much they do stuff actually with Nar. But the Cho'Gath, Fiddlesticks, and Kane are probably going to leave me feeling underwhelmed, but I'm not sure. Patch notes 10.9 for Bard, Karthus, Nami, Trundle, and Wukong is really surprising. I think I know how they nerfed Karthus, and I think a lot of people are memeing it, but I think it's actually gigantic given that he's a jungler, so let's just get into it. Also, the FPX skins are in this patch, so Thresh, Vayne, Malphite, Lee Sin, and Gangplank, I think they all look really, really good. Summoner's Rift rank split ends soon. The Summoner Rift rank split 1 rolls into Split 2 on Sunday, May 3rd. Last chance to grind out those split points for the exclusive Split 1 Aphelios Summoner Icon, Aphelios Emote, and Armor upgrade before the next split. Okay. Champions, Bard, W movement speed reduced and cooldown increased. E cooldown increased. Wow. W Caretaker Shrine, movement speed 50% decaying over 1.5 seconds to 30% decaying over 1.5 seconds. That's really big. Cooldown W, 12 seconds to 14 seconds. So obviously this also equates to less healing inside of the lane. So every 7 Caretaker Shrines that you end up casting, you end up losing 1, which I'm sure that you can look at how might that affect certain bot lane matchups, but typically Bard isn't always down there in the bot lane, is usually roaming. Magical Journey cooldown 18 to 14 seconds to 22 to 16 seconds. So this is something that you can feel, but I don't think that this is completely imbalanced, because initially the first Magical Journeys that you're going to be doing when you're roaming in early and mid game are going to be the most important ones, and I don't think that you're going to be casting them twice, almost regardless. So I don't think this is a super big hit to Magical Journey, especially because you're going to end up basically almost getting it back at the end. But obviously it will reduce some like late game, montage-esque Bard plays with the Magical Journey. But I think overall these are actually really fair balance changes to Bard, which is really surprising. E Cho'Gath, damage increase later, E Vorpal spikes, 22 to 70 to 22 to 82. So the thing about this is that Cho'Gath doesn't get this until hyper late game, so the fact that they're giving him E buffs doesn't really mean anything whatsoever. This is a complete placebo buff all around. This has no impact on basically any lane. If you're playing Cho'Gath inside of the jungle, I believe that you max W, and if you're playing him inside of lane, typically you're maxing Q for the wave clear, and there's no reason to allocate points into E, because this is just not enough damage on Vorpal spikes. So it's a nice little addition, but realistically this is not going to do all that much. In matchups where you would max E because you're going like Rhaast of the Undying and you're going, full tank Cho'Gath or something like that, you can look at it as a nice amount of damage, but still I believe that some of the Cho'Gath one-tricks on KR, even when building full tank Cho'Gath up in top lane, I do believe that they still max Rupture, so I don't think this really does a whole bunch. Fiddlesticks, E damage increase later, just because he's a Scarecrow? Okay, so this doesn't make any sense to me. Fiddlesticks on release was a really, really big letdown, and I thought that his rework was one of the coolest that we've ever seen. However, in terms of actual gameplay, he always just leaves you feeling very underwhelmed. He feels extremely gimmicky, just due to his numbers and how much reliance he has on almost seemingly unnatural setup. The effigies don't feel as good and as oppressive as I originally thought that they were going to, and mostly that's just because of the numbers. The time that they last is really, really long, but the recharge time and the amount that you can charge up at any given moment, it feels a little bit bizarre. I think that there's still going to be a lot of room to experiment with Fiddlesticks, but this is definitely not super good. 70 to 190 to 70 to 210. He's not really getting any damage. Like, you're not looking at Fiddlesticks in mid-game and going, wow, I really wish I had an extra 10 or 15 damage there. And given that he doesn't spam Reap in a lot of situations, it just is very, very confusing. I don't know why Riot's being so reserved with Fiddlesticks when it comes to balancing him, because it just feels like he's in such a bad state and everyone sort of memes him. Naraku Q cooldown refund increased, E damage increased, Q boulder toss 60% to 70%, okay? E crunch 50 to 100 damage to 80 to 200 and... What? Well, they gave him 30 damage on crunch, which, I mean, it's okay. Like, these things aren't still what is preventing Gnar from being able to be good again. This is definitely some nice damage, and obviously the refund can be quite nice on the boulder toss pickup, but you're not looking at Gnar and going, wow, I really wish that I had one more boulder toss in a team fight, or wow, I really wish I had 30 damage on my crunch or something. Like, that's not impactful enough. These are very akin to the Cho'Gath changes in the sense that it doesn't really do anything, and it's not what's gating the champion from being competitively viable. Unfortunately, if you look at LCK, you will see some Gnar picks into set, and if you go and actually watch those games, you'll be feeling pretty sad after walking away. Because Gnar is just, he's in a really, really bad spot, and there's no reason to pick him over other top laners that currently exist, which is really sad, because the champion is really cool, and he has a lot of really cool skins. What I would really like to see is Riot do something where they could actually make him a jungler. So maybe, but the problem is how do you make him a jungler without also buffing his top lane presence? Now, obviously, you can give him extra damage to monsters or something like that, but I think that also his movement speed and other things would need some sort of... it would need some sort of tuning, but I don't even know how you would end up tuning that. Karthus, base movement speed decreased. Karthus has been laying waste in the jungle, so we're nudging him back in line by targeting his ability to get around the map. This is another nerf to mid lane Karthus without any sort of compensation. Base stats, 335 to 325 is really big. This ends up actually adding seconds to his clear speed, which is really, really, really big. And for a champion that already lacks a lot of mobility, this is pretty problematic. For Karthuses that end up going into the inspiration tree and getting magical boots, it's going to be like you're just not running magical boots. So that's going to be the only difference there. Once you end up getting them, you'll end up moving sort of like how you used to, just without any sort of added luxury with the passive of the magical footwear. I think that this is a really, really big buff because Karthus likes to go all around the world, and the 10 MS will actually really add up, given how he clears and how he conducts himself inside of the jungle. I could definitely see this doing something like adding 10 seconds to his full clear, which over enough times, and then depending on how he conducts himself inside of a gank. Apparently I said buff, I didn't mean buff. I think it's a really big nerf, obviously. I think that 10 seconds added per clear is really big, and I think that this is not a small nerf at all. I think it's very, very big. I still think that Karthus will be really good in spots where Karthus already is good. Kane, Q cooldown decreased, bonus damage now applies to minions. W decaying slow increased. Okay. Q reaping slash. 7 to 5 seconds to 6 to 4 seconds. Monster mash. Bonus damage against monsters now also applies to minions. Okay. That's a giant Rhaast buff. That is one of the biggest Rhaast buffs ever for top lane Kane. And also with the change to teleport that came in a couple of patches ago, that's really, really big for Rhaast. W Blades reach to Kane close 70 to 90. This is a gank setup now. Getting an extra 20% on Blades reach is huge. This is really, really big. Now, the other thing that I think goes unspoken about this is that you get a rank 3 Q at rank 1 now, and when you're playing top lane Kane, typically you're skilling W, you're maxing W first because you're trying to go for Rhaast, and you want to get the scaling CDR on the W because it's the most important ability that you have. But this is bonkers. This is a super, super double buff for Rhaast up in top lane, obviously. For Shadow Kane, I don't, obviously, like Shadow Kane inside a lane, he's not really getting a whole lot of benefit here. Because like what matchups are you really picking Shadow Kane into and then trying to get that? So I think this is really, really big. Positional flexibility and that lower, wow, that I think it's massive. I think this is really big for both Rhaast, and this is a Rhaast buff, not a Shadow Kane buff. Really, really big. Lissandra, so this is one of the ones that I was scared about. Q Ice Shard, cooldown 10 to 4 seconds to 8 to 4 seconds. So Lissandra's getting some of her cooldown shaved off, and that used to be what made her so oppressive, was her ability to just endlessly spam the waves. So Riot has to be really careful here. When I think about the current meta, there are still a lot of champions that make it really hard for Lissandra to come back, currently existing in mid lane. And with other buffs that have happened since Lissandra's dominance, and obviously I'm thinking of like buffs to Orianna even, which is one of the champions that should be good against Lissandra, with Azir being so present, with Zoe being so present, with with Victor being so present, etc. There's still a lot of difficult spots for her in the meta, so I don't think that she's going to return to the point that she was once at, where she was basically blind pickable, even if it was going to be a rough matchup for her. However, in the matchups where Lissandra's coming in on red side is like R4, R5, which stands for red side 4th pick, red side 5th pick, I think that this is really, really big and could definitely be very oppressive. By the third point, it's only a 1 second difference, but really these first 2 ranks are the most important inside of the laning phase for helping with cheater recalls and then early game priority. Nami, base health and mana reduced, passive movement speed reduced, okay? Base health is down by 14, mana is down by 12, and passive surging tides, movement speed 60 to 45. Not the end of the world for Nami. We don't really even see her get picked almost ever right now. However, given that there are a lot of enchanter supports coming back, and given that a champion like Soraka has been buffed, and we should be seeing Soraka in mid and top and even the AD carry role as well as support start coming back into the meta, I think a hit to Nami is something that has to be on someone's radar. Also, given the fact that other enchanter supports are starting to rear their heads, like Lulu and like Karma. So, you know, hits to Nami sort of help out those supports quite a lot. Quinn, Q near sight duration increased. Q blinding assault 1.5 to 1.75 seconds. Not the end of the world to get 0.25 seconds. Okay, this isn't a Zoe meme. Quinn is a champion that got hit a very, very long time ago due to an item, and Riot never really gave her any of her love back, even though the item ended up getting hit. So I think that there's actually been quite a few posts about this. In regards to Quinn was never really fixed after that, but Quinn is still a counterpick in top lane sometimes. I just don't think that she's actually as viable as other champions. Trundle R cooldown increased, subjugate 100 to 60 to 120 to 80. I think Trundle's a really bad champion in general. I think that his place inside of the meta is due to most people over-exaggerating or really overestimating his value inside of team compositions. He predominantly rose as an answer to Olaf, and then also as a way to deter people from picking Sejuani or other types of tank compositions, but most times he ends up taking on the role of Olaf in most of the games that he's in, and I think that that's just very underwhelming. So, a lot of people will say that Trundle's actually good right now, or they'll even say that he's oppressive. And while he can be really good as like a Trundle is a counter pick jungler. He shouldn't be a blind pick jungler by any means. He also shouldn't be a flexible jungler in the sense that he can come into a draft early. Which I guess you could say he's being blind picked, but talking about jungle matchups in isolation doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because junglers are more so to meld with their laners in the team composition, and that's how they should be evaluated. Trundle typically doesn't meld very well when he comes in very early inside of a draft, and he doesn't have a lot of synergy. He's able to be drafted against very well, so if Trundle's ever going to come in, typically it'll be on R4 or R5, unless the opponents really botch their B1, B2, B3, and obviously I'm referring to Blue 1, Blue 2, Blue 3, in terms of blue side picks. And even then, there's still probably ways where the opponents can draft against him. So Trundle really requires a lot of setup in order to make him work, and I think that in the current meta, there's way better champions that do exist. I think he even has he has a lot of bad team compositional matchups where he slots in, and the times where he's really, really, really good, I think not super fun. Anyways, Wukong, base armor decreased, Q damage decreased, W clone damage decreased. We've seen players quickly and effectively harness the power of Wukong's rework, so we're further calibrating the monkey to bring him back. So let's take a look here. Q crushing blow, damage 30 to 130 to 20 to 120, armor 34 to 31, and W warrior trickster clone damage 40 to 60% to 35 to 55%. I think these nerfs are fairly balanced. Overall, I think that this isn't super big. It gives more counter potential up to him in top lane. Wukong hasn't been seen in the LEC, LCK, or LCS, but he has been being played a lot in LPL. One of the things that, you know, when I see Wukong that I'm most excited about is obviously the Volibear rework, because I'm really looking forward to that. Item, Sanguine Blade. Cost decreased, attack damage increased. Okay, so cost is down by 100 and attack damage is up by 5. This is really big for the laners that end up using this inside of a solo lane. So this is a buff to Callista if she uses it in a solo lane. This is a buff to Draven if he uses it in a solo lane. It is a buff to Negan if he would use it inside of a solo lane, and obviously I would, I'm referring to the Bloodthirster Death Stance version of Lifesteal Graves. This is basically a buff to any of the split pushing champions that end up utilizing Sanguine Blade. Being able to get it one entire wave early is really oppressive due to the nature of the item and the snowbally effects that can come with it. So this is definitely surprising. Okay, ARAM balance changes don't really matter. Essence Emporium returns, okay, bug fixes, quality of life. I always wait for people to tell me. So before I get to the most important part of the patch, which is the skins, let's recap really quick and talk about competitive and SoloQ. So the bar changes for SoloQ and competitive I don't think is really going to move the needle all that much. I can imagine that this would do, micro percent whenever you see those threads on Reddit, like patch review by the numbers or something like that. I can't imagine this doing too much. I don't think it'll do anything in competitive. I think it can maybe do something in SoloQ. Cho'Gath change, I think, is placebo pretty much all around. Fiddlesticks change, I think, is completely irrelevant almost all around. Naraku Q refund, again, I think that these are all pretty much placebos. They just seem like a lot of filler buffs. This honestly, like, this patch has more filler than a Botox clinic, so I'm not really sure where we're going with this one. Karthus, base movement speed, this one is actually really big. This is massive for SoloQ, and it's massive for competitive, but I'm not, I like, no one's really picking Karthus as much as he should be able to be picked, and I think that mostly this just helps prevent Karthuses from terrorizing people. The Rhaast change is the biggest one of the patch. I think that this is actually massive for both SoloQ and competitive, given that it adds a new top laner, and given that it adds a top laner that can be really problematic for a lot of the champions that are in the meta right now. Because Rhaast combined with these buffs being able to come online sooner, being able to, and what I mean by coming online sooner is I don't just mean the fact that he can farm easier and whatnot. I mean the fact that he basically gets mobility added to him, given the fact that he has 1 second shaved off of his Q. The decaying slow on Blade's Reach is really good for gank setup inside a lane, and then also the teleport change that happened a couple of patches ago. I think it's really, really big for Rhaast. I think this is the biggest change of the patch, potentially. I think the Lissandra change is the biggest patch, or the second biggest change of the patch. I think this is massive for competitive in spots where people would want Lissandra. And then, obviously, for SoloQ, I think it's really big as well, because I think that oppressiveness in early stages and just really tilting your opponent is quite important. Nami, I don't think really does anything. I think that it ultimately just dissuades her from being picked inside of competitive, and then obviously for SoloQ it's quite bad. Quinn change is ultimately irrelevant, and then I think that Trundle, R change is ultimately irrelevant. Wukong is one of the best balance changes, obviously both for SoloQ and competitive, but I think this could be much more problem up for him for competitive than anything else. And then again, to reiterate, because I know that a lot of people will not have the opinion that Trundle is useless, and I implore you to go into most of the games where Trundle doesn't get some gross early advantages or something, or just look at Trundle in games where he ends up sort of taking on the role of Olaf. Sanguine Blade, we already just talked about that. ARAM balance changes. Okay, 10% damage dealt, minus 10% damage taken. Wow, amazing. Zed, 5, wow, great. ARAM balance changes. You're definitely going to want to make sure to utilize these when you're trying to level up a brand new account by hand. Okay. All right, let's get to the skins. Okay. Yeah, that one's not really doing it for me. That's, yeah, let's not, yeah. That one's not really, that one did not really do it. All right, so we got, so the Malphite one looks really cool. The Malphite one sort of looks like Moltres, if Moltres had a little bit too much to eat. It looks like Ashe really hasn't been working him out lately. Okay, so this is, I think Moltres has been visiting McDonald's a little bit too much lately. So not really sure what's going on there. So whenever Malphite ults, just imagine Moltres getting a little bit bloated and falling out of the sky. Maybe it'll even look like Ho-Oh. Who knows? This change looks like Protoman from Mega Man. If anyone's actually ever seen Protoman, this is reminding me of Protoman from Mega Man, or it's reminding me of Beautiful Joe from GameCube. If you're a boomer like me and were around during that time, so I think that this this definitely looks like Protoman. I'm gonna try to search Protoman right now, and see if I can end up. Yeah, this is absolutely Protoman. So let's just yeah, this even got the hair going, alright? So Protoman is here. It's actually Protoman. Same pose. Okay, now this one might be Beautiful Joe. Let me take a look here. Let me take a look at Beautiful Joe. And yeah, I do believe that we did locate Beautiful Joe. So this is pretty good. This is, I mean, we're getting a lot of value here on Google with some of these games. Captain Falcon maybe even really coming in here. So this is actually exquisite. We're really getting into the down and dirty here. And okay, this is Beautiful Joe in the alpha. This is the one that gets scrapped. This is the Beautiful Joe that was supposed to do a crossover with like Donkey Kong or something, but it ended up going into Winnie the Pooh, and this is like a pot of honey. I honestly, I have no idea where this is going. This reminds me of like one of those this reminds me of someone that like carries around like a pee bag. This looks like a urine bag that he's sort of carrying around right now, and I have no idea what he's doing with it. I have absolutely no clue what is going on there. So the Beautiful Joe, the Protoman skins and the Beautiful Joe skins, fantastic. McDonald's Moltres, definitely a really good one as well. And then this guy, I would say that he lost to Shopkeeper, but looks like he lost to Wardrobe Keeper. And then again, this, I don't know, it's like Winnie the Pooh. I have no idea what's going on there. So that is absolutely, that's definitely something. So yeah, definitely make sure to get these skins. You can support FPX and obviously the team by getting them, I believe. But I think these are pretty cool, and I believe that they're supposed to have chromas, right? Or is this the only chroma that comes with it? I don't actually know. But overall, I think that they look really cool. I think this skin looks really cool. This Lee Sin, the black one right here. The black, there's that navy blue. I actually can't see. I'm pretty far away from the monitor right now. And the splash art looks really, really cool too. So Moltres does indeed look a little bit pissed here. So that's pretty much it. The splash art on Thresh actually looks way cooler than the in-game model. This is like one of those debated things. This is like when, you ever see those videos on YouTube of like Instagram models, you know, before and after Photoshop? This is actually what it is. Or it's like when you go to order like a pizza or something from a restaurant and they show you a photo of it, and then you actually get it. This is like when you look at the pancake photos at like IHOP or something, and you don't realize that they don't use actual maple syrup in the photo. They use something like car oil because the pancakes don't absorb the car oil or something like that. So it looks like it's maple syrup, but it's not. I have no idea. That is exactly what I'm thinking of here. So I don't know. Overall, I think they're really cool skins. I think that this splash art up here is also really cool. Honestly, this seems like a really bad team composition, if I'm being a little bit honest. I have no idea why they have Teemo in top lane, and they have a Lux in mid, and they have there's really not a whole lot of setup here. I think that Lux probably just should have been a Zoe, and I'm not entirely sure like why you're picking Teemo unless you're like he's griefing his team. But it does seem like they're all in the same lane, so maybe this is actually like that North American guy that just goes invisible as Teemo, in the middle of mid lane, and maybe that's why the whole group came to mid, because they're a little upset. I have no idea. Wrap it up. Take it away, Sanch.